Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Hilmi Asyam Nur, and today I will present about types of translation, translation process, and types of meaning. So this is list of contents. The first one is types of translation based on the language involved and the medium involved. And the next is translation process according to Naida and Saber and according to Bathgate. And the next is types of meanings as explained by Mona Baker in her books, in another words. Okay, the first topic is types of translation based on the language involved and the medium involved. In types of translation based on the language involved, there are intralingual translation or rewording, interlingual translation or translation proper, and intersemiotic translation or transmutation. While in types of translation based on the medium involved, there are translation, interpretation, subtitle, and dubbing. So let me explain one by one. First is intralingual translation. Intralingual translation or rewording is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of other signs in the same language. For example, is in the Harry Potter book, which is the alterations between UK edition and US edition. We can see the example in the table in UK edition. Shan't became want in US edition, and sherbet lemon became lemon drop. Dustbin became trash can, and etc. Next is interlingual translation. Interlingual translation or translation proper is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of some other languages. For example, in the case of hello, it is pointed out that English does not distinguish between face-to-face greeting or that on the phone, whereas some other languages like French, Italian, Japanese, German make this distinction. In Japanese, konnichiwa is hello, but answering a phone, they say moshi moshi. Another example is in the Holy Quran, which is the uh, source language is in Arabic and the target language is in English. Next is intersemiotic translation. Intersemiotic translation or transmutation is an interpretation of verbal signs by means of signs of nonverbal sign system. So let's see the example first. So from the video, we know that Tchaikovsky, which is the composer from Russia, composed the Romeo and Juliet. He actually performed an intersemiotic translation. He translated Shakespeare's play from the linguistic code into a musical one. The expression code was changed entirely from words to musical sound. The next is types of translation based on the medium involved. The first one is translation, which is a translation in the form of written text into written text. You can see the example above. The source language is English and in the form of written text, and the target language is in Indonesia in the form of written text. Another example is in Al-Quran, which is the source language is in Arabic in the form of written text, and the target language is in other language, also in the form of written text. The second is interpretation. Interpretation is conducted by an interpreter, which is a person who translates a spoken language to another language. In other words, they must understand and memorize content in the original language and reproduce the statements into a second language. So basically, interpretation is an oral translation, which is spoken language to spoken language on the spot. There are two types of interpretation. The first one is consecutive interpreter, which is someone who interprets speech after the original speaker has paused or finished speaking. And the second is simultaneous speaker, simultaneous interpreter, which is works in real time and speaking without any pauses. So let's see the example.
Jadi kemarin sekitar jam 3 sore Anda masuk ke keraton dan mengambil foto-foto.
So yesterday around 3 in the afternoon, you went to the palace to take photos?
Well, I went to the palace to have a look around, and yes, I did take some photos.
Dan seorang
Maaf Bu, ya saya ke keraton dan ya saya mengambil foto.
Okay, so from the example, we know that this is consecutive interpreter example, and the interpreter translate after the original speaker paused or finished speaking. Next is subtitle. Subtitles are lines of the text at the bottom of the screen that translate the spoken dialogue into another language. Subtitle is also audiovisual translation, which translates the spoken language or spoken text to written text, and the viewers can hear the source language. So this is the example is the movie Turning Red. This is the subtitle in Indonesian language because the target language is in Indonesia and the source language is in English. Next is dubbing. Dubbing is a post-production process where the original language of recording is swapped with audio in a different language and is then mixed with the audio of the media to make it sound as natural as possible. So basically, dubbing is audio-visual translation, which translates the spoken text to spoken text, and the viewers cannot hear the source language. So this is the example.
I'm Ash Ketchum. I came from Pallet in the Kanto region. And this is my good buddy Pikachu. Nice to meet you.
Okay, so basically, the original sound of the movie is in Japanese, but the dubber make it the movie into English version. So she swapped the Japanese sound into the English language. Okay, next is translation process according to NIDA and Tabor and according to Bathgate. So the translation process according to NIDA and Tabor, basically there are 3 steps. The first step is analysis, the second step is transfer, and the third step is restructuring. While translation process according to Bathgate, there are 7 steps. The first one is tuning, means the translator try to get the context of text. And the second is analysis. In this step, translator analyze the text in the sentence level. And the third is understanding or comprehension. In these steps, translator try to catch the overall meaning of the text and be equipped with his vast knowledge of the text. The fourth is terminology, an effort to find equivalent and appropriate terms for the transfer from source language to the target language. The fifth is restructuring, which is translator try to make new structure in target language after the source language text has been split structurally and semantically into clauses, phrases, or words. And the sixth is checking, means proofreading. And the last but not least is discussion, which is the final results in target language is ready to be criticized or otherwise praised by other people. Okay, so this is the compare and contrast translation process between NIDA and Taber's process and Pathgate process. The first one, in NIDA and Taber's process, the first step is analysis. In Pathgate process, the analysis step is stated more detailed by divided into 3 steps: tuning, analysis, and comprehension. Second, in NIDA and Taber's process, the second step is transfer. In Pathgate process, the transfer step is stated as terminology. The third, in NIDA and Taber's process, the third step is restructuring or reconstruction. In Pathgate process, the restructuring step is also explained as restructuring. And the contrast, in Pathgate's translation process, there are 2 steps that cannot be represented by NIDA and Taber's process. They are checking and discussion. Okay, let's move to the types of meaning as explained by Mona Baker in her book, In Other Words. So, types of meaning. According to Cruz, we can distinguish 4 main types of meaning in words and utterances. The first one is propositional meaning. The second is expressive meaning. The third, presupposed meaning. And fourth, evoked meaning. Propositional meaning. The propositional meaning of a word or an utterance arises from the relation between it and what it refers to or describes in a real or imaginary world. For example, tas and buku, meja and kursi, and etc. Next is expressive meaning. Expressive meaning cannot be judged as true or false. This is because expressive meaning relates to the speaker's feeling or attitude rather than to what words and utterances refer to. For the example, kurus and cramping, or thin and skinny. For example, in a sentence, dia kurus, he is thin. Dia cramping, he is skinny. In this case, dia kurus or he is thin is more polite than dia cramping or he is skinny. Okay. The next is presupposed meaning. Presupposed meaning arises from co-occurrence restriction, that is, restrictions on what other words or expressions we expect to see before or after a particular lexical unit. These restrictions are of 2 types. The first one is selectional restrictions. Selectional restrictions are the semantic restriction that a word imposes on the environment in which it occurs. Okay, the example, jantan and laki-laki. The example in a sentence, singa jantan berkelahi, 2 male lions fighting, seorang laki-laki terjatuh, a man fell. Jantan and laki-laki means male, but jantan is used for male animals, while laki-laki is used for male humans. The second presupposed meaning is collocational restrictions. Collocational restrictions tend to show more variation across languages than do selectional restrictions. For example, make a mistake in English is more natural than do a mistake. Laws are broken in English, but in Arabic, they are contradicted. In English, teeth are brushed, but in German and Italian, they are polished. In Polish, they are washed, and in Russian, they are cleaned. Okay, the next is evoked meaning that arise from dialect and register variation. Okay, the first one is a dialect. A dialect is a variety of language which has currency within a specific community or group of speakers. It may be classified on one of the following bases. The first one is geographical, may be of 2 types, primary and secondary. Primary exemplified by the fact that if we know what someone's accent, we can get information that the person who speaks with that accent comes from a country or region that use that accent. And the secondary involves any further inferences, frequently of a stereotypical kind, which we derive from this. For example, Enya and Ibu, which means mother. Enya is Betawi dialect, while Ibu is usually used by Indonesian people in general to call mother. Another example, lorry and truck. Lorry is British English and truck is American English. The second is temporal. A temporal dialect is a language variety which is used by a certain social group at a particular time. For example, fly heaven and airport. Fly heaven is Old English and airport is current English. Another example is art law, Old English, and geology, current English, as well as fairly and really. The third is social. Social is a language variety defined in terms of sociological class or another broad social category. For example, scent, perfume, napkin, and serviette. The last but not least is register. Register is a variety of language that a language user considers appropriate to a specific situation. Register variation arises from variations along the following parameters. The first one is a field of discourse. It's about what content we'll be writing about, or is the content common sense or specialized? If the content is specialized, what technical terms we'll be using, and etc. For example, in the case of a recipe, it is about food and food preparation. Another example, linguistic choices will vary according to whether the speaker is taking part in an online game competition or discussing about game. Okay, the second is tenor of discourse. Tenor of discourse relates what is the relationship between the author and the audience, for example, and then is the relationship personal or impersonal? Is the relationship formal or informal? Who is the audience? And etc. For the example, when the head of a business talks to an employee and when someone talks to his friends. The word for the example, memberikan and ngasih. Memberikan is formal, ngasih is informal. For the example, in Indonesian language, kemarin Presiden memberikan ucapan selamat kepada perusahaan kita. Another example, Rahmat ngasih tahu kalau besok hari libur. The next is mood of discourse. Mood of discourse relates will the text will be spoken like or written like, or how will the text sound spoken like or written like, and then will the text be planned or spontaneous, and how will the text be published. For example, a fairy tale in the written form may have a narrative or entertaining function. So that's all about my presentation today. I hope that we learn something through this presentation. I'm sorry if there is any mistake in my presentation, and thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a nice day.